Hey there, all you friends, true believers, and newcomers alike, and happy Spider-Man Day. Even though it won't be Spider-Man Day anymore by the time you're seeing this, but that's okay, who cares? I'm Superfly Comics Guy, and I'm here to take you through the amazing Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 2 by JMS, which has recently been announced to be receiving a reprint in 2024, so that's exciting. And plenty of you must be curious to see what this book is all about, so I got you covered because I'll be taking you through the cover, the spine, the contents collected, the build quality, and a flip through where I can share some of my thoughts, opinions, and recommendations on this book with you guys. So, if you enjoy the video at any point, you know how to show it, and you're always free to leave your own comments down below. But for now, let's take a look at this and see if it matches up to Volume 1. Grab your web shooters, and let's go. Alright, so starting off with the dust jacket here, we've got the standard cover here by Mike Deodato Jr., and this book does have two direct market variant covers, and all of the covers, as far as I know, will be staying the exact same for the upcoming reprint. So you have the standard cover here, you have a back in black variant cover by Ron Garney, which I think is amazing. I would have loved to have gotten that one, but didn't even know about direct market variant covers when I picked this book up. And the other variant cover you have is a One More Day variant cover by Joe Quesada. So let's flip this here, take a look at the spine. Very nice, very similar to Volume 1. Those two volumes pair very nicely on the shelf together. And then the back, one of the most momentous Spidey eras of all. So you got a nice little cover gallery here, cover price of $125 US, $158 Canadian, and we're collecting Amazing Spider-Man 515 through 545, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man 1 through 4, and number 24, The Marvel Knights Spider-Man 19 through 22, Sensational Spider-Man 41, Spider-Man The Other Sketchbook, and Spider-Man One More Day Sketchbook. Let's flip this over and take a look under the good old dust jacket. There we are, and look at that. Very, very lovely wraparound cover here by Joe Quesada this is one of the panels from One More Day, and say what you will about that story, but this is a lovely, lovely piece. Very, very beautiful board design here for this omnibus. But as far as the story from which it comes from, well, we'll get into that. So let's start flipping through. Alrighty guys, let's start diving in here. Starting off with the world's thickest end paper. Look at this. It's like freaking Bristol board. And then a little credits page here. It's not really a table of contents because it's not in order. I would have preferred if these credits here were in order regarding how it appears in the book, just because it's easier to track your reading that way, but not a big deal. But yeah, here we go. I'm going to try to avoid spoilers as much as possible here, except for one little section at the end that I want to talk about, and most of you probably know what that is, but don't worry, when I get to that, I will announce it so that you know which point you should skip ahead to if you want to completely avoid spoilers. Now I'm going to start off a little bit differently from what I usually do and start off with talking about the art. Because in Volume 1, and speaking of Volume 1, you should definitely check out my Volume 1 review of this series if you want to get caught up on some of the context and where we find ourselves in the story of Spider-Man. But yeah, in Volume 1, most of that was drawn by John Romita Jr., and then just the very last bit of Volume 1 was drawn by Mike Deodato Jr. In this omnibus, the art is a bit more varied. Mike Deodato Jr. does quite a large chunk of the book. You can see his style here, and I found myself liking his style a lot more here than I did in Volume 1. He's got a very sort of moody, dramatic style, and then for all the Spider-Man scenes, he kind of has a McFarlane-esque style sometimes with the poses. I definitely love the way he draws MJ. I think he captures her very well. But the art overall is a lot more varied in this omnibus compared to Volume 1, because you also get artists like Ron Garney, who's absolutely fantastic. Other artists like Mike Wieringo, Pat Lee, Tyler Kirkham, I believe. Quite a few. But overall, I thought the art was quite good in this volume. But anyway, this is a pretty exciting time for Spider-Man because this is sort of around the time where the New Avengers was going on and Spider-Man became a part of that. That was really, really cool to see because I really enjoyed the New Avengers Omnibus Volume 1. So yeah, Spidey's in the New Avengers at this point in time. So that's pretty cool. Actually, Aunt May and Jarvis start having this really cool relationship and friendship, which was neat to see. But what's kind of interesting is it's a lot less friendly neighborhood Spider-Man in this volume. Spidey's a bit more of a celebrity here. I'm trying to think, like, whereas in volume 1 you got a lot of sort of like grounded street level stories, or it would show off like Peter at his new teaching job. You barely get any of that here. Like, I struggle to think of the amount of times that they show Peter at his teaching job here. And like, you see Spider-Man going up against Hydra, which is very weird. You don't typically see Spidey going up against them, but it's sort of just reflective of the time period of Marvel at this time and sort of where Spidey found himself. In Volume 1, JMS also sort of introduced this idea of mysticism to Spidey's powers. It was more of a question, really. It's like, was it an accident that Spidey got his powers, or was it fate? Was it science, or was it mysticism? And this book kind of expands a little bit on that train of thought as well, because one of the story arcs you get in here is called The Other, which sort of centers around this mysterious ailment that Spidey seems to have. He finds that his powers are failing him, possibly discovering some new powers. It was interesting. JMS seems to really like this sort of mystical stuff, but I will admit it gets a little bit weird in this volume. I'm trying to think of how best to compare it. You remember that wacky Silver Age story where like Spidey just grew 6 arms? It's, you know, we're dealing with that sort of level of goofiness when it comes to The Other. But you also get the return of Moreland in here, who comes back for this crazy, brutal fight. But, you know, you also have Spidey keeping on strong with his quips. You gotta have quips when you're writing Spidey, and I do quite enjoy those here too. But really, the big star of the show for a lot of this omnibus is actually Civil War. This Omni really is less of a Spidey story and more so Spidey's perspective on all the crazy stuff that was happening in the Marvel Universe at this time. So if you don't know what Civil War is, it's really just a big political debate. There's this thing called the Superhero Registration Act that comes into play, where heroes are demanded to register their identities so that they can be governed and operate in a more controlled manner. And this causes a huge rift amongst the heroes. It's like, should we register or should we not? And that sort of splits into 2 sides. You have the side that's pro-registration, and then you have the side that's against it. So, I mean, Civil War in the comics really is just a big, dumb action movie. But I'll be honest, it's still entertaining. You get a lot of cool moments with Civil War. Moments that would actually inspire the MCU, like that super inspirational Cap speech, you know, "No, you move." That iconic moment. Of course, Spidey gets his new Iron Spider outfit during this time, which I love. Such a cool costume. But what's really interesting is you just get a lot of really introspective moments with Peter. Him sort of considering his options. And even though I already knew what was going to happen, I could really still feel the tension in a lot of these scenes, whether it's tension between Peter and other heroes, or tension amongst Peter and his loved ones, or even tension Peter, you know, amongst himself, doubting himself. I thought that whole thing was really portrayed really well. And speaking of Peter's loved ones, I really enjoyed how this book hammers home how Aunt May and MJ are Peter's source of inner strength. There's some really great moments with the three of them here. Now, you also get the Back in Black story in here, and that was my personal favorite section of the Omni, because it's one of the rare times when you get to see a darker side of Spidey, and you get to see the return of the black suit. Not the symbiote, but Back in Black will show you why you do not anger Spidey. I can't tell you what that thing is that angers him, but Back in Black really shows how powerful, intimidating, and scary Spidey can be. And I just think some of the most interesting stories happen when Spidey gets pushed too far and loses his cool. Now, naturally, that shouldn't happen too often. It shouldn't be used too often because you need that contrast with the status quo, because we expect Spidey to be the nice guy, the funny, quippy guy. But if you piss him off, yeah, well, the neighborhood gets a lot less friendly, that's for sure. I really, really enjoyed that sort of badass portrayal of Spidey during Back in Black. Now, of course, there are some plot holes in Back in Black, particularly involving some scenes and logistics in a hospital. So it's not perfect, but I didn't really care. I was just having such a blast with it. But we gotta address the elephant in the room, which is how this omnibus ends, which is one more day. One of the most hated Spidey stories, known as the starting point for a lot of the biggest complaints with modern Spider-Man. Now, I don't want to flip to One More Day because it'll immediately start spoiling stuff for you, but I will talk about it. So this is where I want to give a minor spoiler warning. If you want to skip this, you can skip to the extras section where we can talk about stuff. But I do want to kind of give my vague thoughts on One More Day. So, final warning for spoilers in case you want to leave. But let's talk about it. So, what's the deal with One More Day? Well, Marvel editorial for a long time felt that Spidey at this point in time was straying too far from his roots. He was getting older, less relatable, and that was sort of preventing them from telling the types of stories they've been wanting to tell for a while. They felt, actually, that one of the biggest obstacles for them was Peter's marriage to MJ, and you can confirm this by looking at some of the interviews in the extras section, which we'll get to later. But those corroborate this, and so that's something they've been trying to undo for years now. Undo Peter's marriage to Mary Jane. And One More Day is the vehicle through which they finally did that. Which I find to be really weird, because it's like JMS spent all this time in Volume 1 trying to get Peter and MJ back together again. And naturally, yeah, of course, because MJ is Peter's emotional center. Just look at stories like the Todd McFarlane era or the Larson era, or like I said, the Volume 1 of JMS's run here. Some of the best, and in my opinion, just my most favorite Spidey moments, are when it's just Peter and MJ being vulnerable with each other and leaning on each other. But, alas, this is what editorial wanted. They wanted to split them up, so they did that by any ham-fisted means necessary, and man, it really felt forced to me. Because in order for that to happen, they really force Peter to act very out of character compared to what I would expect from him traditionally. Quite frankly, he really acts like an idiot, childish, selfish during One More Day, and man, they really lay into this Deus Ex Machina to try to reach this end goal of theirs. Like I said, I'm being as vague as I possibly can, but I was already aware of the story of One More Day before I read it in this omnibus, so I've already kind of just accepted it as a fact of where current Spidey sits. But man, after I finished One More Day, like, I wasn't angry because it's like I knew where it was going, but it just left me feeling hollow. And it just sucks that both volumes, volume 1 and this volume here, just end on such a downer story. But anyway, here we are at the extra section, and welcome everybody who skipped the minor spoilers. But look at how big this extra section is. It's pretty massive. This might be the biggest extra section I've seen in any of the Omnis that I own. We start off here with an afterword by Stan Lee talking about his thoughts on some of the stories in here. I won't go through all the extras because, like, Jesus, man, like there's a lot of them. But I'll talk about some highlights about what you can expect. Some in-progress art you can see here. Some costume designs as well. Different ideas for the Iron Spider suit. You get a sketchbook here, a couple of sketchbooks actually. Some variant covers, which are nice to see. But what I found to be the most interesting, actually, was some of the interviews that you get in here. Like there's a few Marvel Spotlight interviews with some of the creators of this series and other Spidey series that were going on around this time. You know, people like Peter David and JMS, of course, Joe Quesada. There really are a lot of interesting things I think you can learn from these interviews. Like, for example, there's an interview specifically dedicated to One More Day with Joe Quesada, and he's kind of talking about how for a long time they've been trying to undo a major portion of Spidey's history, quoted as saying that it was something needed for the longevity of the character, and I don't know, what can I say? I'm not sure I agree with that. There's an interview with JMS in here, which is pretty cool too, where he gets to talk about like some of his favorite characters during this time, stories, some things he didn't get to do that he would have liked to do, some regrets he has about how stuff turned out. For example, he actually does talk about Sin's past in that interview and how his original idea was changed, but he was just told, no, don't worry, the fans will love it. Interesting how that turned out, huh? Or how during Civil War he wanted to explore more of the dynamic between Peter and Tony Stark. And maybe it's just me, but reading these interviews, you sort of get this underlying sense of some tones of conflict with the editorial. He never, the creators never outright say it, but you kind of get the sense that they felt limited in some of the stories they were able to tell, and I don't know. It's some interesting food for thought. But hey, sales for Spidey did triple around this time, so that's pretty cool. And then you get some cool little Marvel handbook excerpts here as well. This is so cool to me because I actually had one of the Marvel Universe handbooks as a kid that I picked up at like a book sale at school one day. Man, I still have that thing somewhere. But really, really cool to see this sort of, just entries from different characters, and then you get to see like their power level ranked based on different characteristics. So that's pretty cool. But that's generally it for your extras section here. Now, as we start looking at the build quality for this omnibus, keep in mind I have one of the original printings. I believe some of the printings had actually a flat spine, but the one I have here is a rounded spine. You can see pretty big eye, lays pretty flat. Yeah, I can't say I ever really had an issue with gutter loss while reading this. The book lays over quite well. And the pages are pretty good too. Pretty good quality. On very minor occasions did I notice page bleed, but generally quite good. Oh, and before I forget, 1,136 pages is what you get in this omnibus. But okay, now to just wrap up with some closing thoughts here. So even though it may seem like I ended on a bit of a downer with my discussion of One More Day, I still recommend this book, absolutely, especially if you enjoyed Volume 1, or if you're generally just a fan of this era of Marvel. Now, is it as good as Volume 1? Well, no. It definitely lacks that friendly neighborhood charm that I love so much about Spider-Man, and that was so present in Volume 1. But there are still a lot of really solid stories in here, barring the way it ends. But yeah, the artwork is fantastic too. And generally, I think there's a lot to be enjoyed here. But that's been my review of The Amazing Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 2 by JMS. Let me know what you thought about the review, the book. Are you planning on picking up the upcoming reprint of this book? If so, which cover are you going to get? Leave your thoughts down below. I'll be happy to read and have a discussion with you guys. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to catch you in another video real soon. Don't worry, we're definitely not done with Spidey in the near future. But yeah, have yourself a great day, guys. I've been Superfly Comics Guy, and until next time, keep reading. Bye-bye, guys.